The morning sun peeked through the tall glass windows of the Sakura Hotel, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor of the grand lobby. Harumi Tanaka adjusted her neat black and white uniform, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she pushed her cleaning cart toward the service elevator. At 28, she moved with quiet efficiency, her petite frame carrying a dignity that seemed at odds with the mundane tasks she performed each day. "Tanaka-san, don't forget the executive suite on the 14th floor," called her supervisor Miyuki from behind the service desk. The American businessman checked out early. Harumi bowed slightly. "Yes, I'll take care of it right away." As the elevator climbed, Harumi leaned against the wall and closed her eyes for a moment. She had been on shift since 5 a.m., and the fatigue was beginning to settle into her bones. 3 years at the Sakura Hotel, and still the long hours felt as challenging as they had on her first day. But she never complained. This job paid better than her previous positions, and the staff dormitory meant she could send more money home to her parents in Hokkaido. The executive suite was a mess, as these rooms often were. Clothes strewn about, room service dishes abandoned, towels dropped carelessly on the bathroom floor. Harumi worked systematically, returning order to chaos with practice movements. As she cleaned, she hummed softly to herself, a habit she couldn't quite break even after all these years. The melody was Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, a piece she had once known by heart. Her fingers moved instinctively as she smoothed the fresh bed sheets, imagining the keyboard beneath them. Sometimes when she was alone like this, she would allow herself these small moments of remembrance. "That's beautiful," said a voice from the doorway. Harumi jumped, nearly dropping the pillow she was fluffing. It was Akiko from housekeeping, leaning against the doorframe with an amused expression. "I didn't know you could sing." "I wasn't singing," Harumi said quickly, her cheeks warming. "Just humming. It helps pass the time." Akiko shrugged. "Well, it's pretty. You coming to the staff lunch today? Management is making some big announcement." Harumi nodded, though her mind was already elsewhere. Staff gatherings always made her uncomfortable. She preferred to blend into the background, to do her job without drawing attention to herself. It was easier that way, safer somehow. Later in the staff cafeteria, Harumi sat at the end of a long table, picking at her bento box while conversations flowed around her. The hotel manager, Mr. Taniguchi, stood at the front of the room, explaining that the Sakura would be hosting a major corporate event next week for Fujita Technologies, one of Japan's leading tech companies. Their CEO, Mr. Yamamoto, is very particular, Mr. Taniguchi emphasized, his usual stern expression even more pronounced. Everything must be perfect. This could mean a regular contract with Fujita for their international executives. As the meeting continued, Harumi's thoughts drifted. Through the cafeteria windows, she could see into the hotel's grand ballroom, where workers were setting up for an evening wedding. In the corner sat a gleaming black grand piano. Her hands twitched in her lap. "Tanaka-san?" Mr. Taniguchi's voice cut through her daydream. "Is the executive floor ready for inspection?" "Yes, sir," she replied quickly, straightening her posture. "All rooms are complete," he nodded and moved on. Beside her, Akiko leaned in and whispered, "Always so professional. Do you ever relax?" Harumi offered a small smile but said nothing. How could she explain that once? Her life had been filled with music and dreams so different from this reality. After her shift ended, Harumi took a different route back to the staff dormitory, one that passed by the local music school. She did this sometimes, pausing outside to listen to the sounds of practice that filtered through the windows. Scales, etudes, the occasional sonata. Today a young boy was struggling through the same Chopin piece she had been humming earlier. His timing was off, his transitions clumsy. Without thinking, her fingers began to move at her sides, playing the correct rhythm in the air. "Are you a pianist?" asked an elderly woman who had stopped beside her. Harumi quickly lowered her hands. "No," she said. "I just like music," the woman smiled knowingly. "My grandson is in there. So much talent, but he hates to practice." "Were you self-taught?" "I studied for 15 years, Harumi admitted quietly. "A long time ago." 15 years isn't something you just forget," the woman said, her eyes kind. "Music stays in the fingers." That night, in her small dormitory room, Harumi pulled out the faded photograph she kept tucked in her nightstand drawer. In it, a younger version of herself sat at a piano, her posture perfect, her expression serious despite being only 12 years old. Her teacher, Mr. Watanabe, stood beside her, his hand resting proudly on her shoulder after her first recital. She traced the edge of the photo, remembering the feel of the keys beneath her fingers, the way time seemed to both stand still and rush forward when she played. Music had been her entire world then. Her parents had sacrificed so much for her lessons, working extra shifts and saving every spare yen. Then came her father's accident at the factory, the medical bills, the difficult decision to sell the upright piano that had been her 16th birthday present, and finally the painful conversation with Mr. Watanabe, explaining why she couldn't continue her studies at the conservatory despite earning a partial scholarship. Such talent, he had said, shaking his head. To waste it is a tragedy. But life wasn't about talent or passion, Harumi had learned. It was about responsibility, about doing what needed to be done. So she had taken the first of many jobs, sending money home each month, watching her dreams of concert halls and standing ovations fade like old sheet music. The next morning, Harumi was assigned to help prepare the ballroom for the upcoming corporate event. As she polished tables and arranged chairs, her eyes kept returning to the piano in the corner. It sat untouched, majestic, and forlorn at the same time. "You keep staring at it," said Takeshi, one of the younger porters who was helping move furniture. "Do you play?" "I used to," Harumi said, surprised at herself for admitting even that much. "Really?" Takeshi's eyebrows shot up. "Like professionally?" She shook her head. "No, nothing like that. Just lessons when I was young." "Play something," he encouraged, gesturing toward the piano. "I couldn't," Harumi said quickly. "I haven't touched a piano in years. Besides, we're working." "We're almost done," Takeshi insisted. "Just one song. Nobody's around." For a moment, Harumi was tempted. Her fingers almost itched with the desire to feel those ivory keys again, but she shook her head firmly and returned to arranging the decorative centerpieces. That evening, after most of the staff had gone to dinner, Harumi found herself back in the ballroom, straightening details that didn't need straightening. The room was silent and empty, bathed in the soft glow of the chandeliers overhead, and there was the piano, its lid propped open as if in invitation. Before she could talk herself out of it, Harumi crossed the room and sat on the bench. She didn't touch the keys, not yet. Instead, she closed her eyes and placed her hands in her lap, feeling the posture return to her body as naturally as breathing. Back straight, shoulders relaxed, wrists loose. Slowly, she lifted her hands and let them hover above the keyboard. What would happen if she played? Would she remember? Would it hurt too much to taste that old dream again? Just once, she whispered to herself, and her fingers descended. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune filled the empty ballroom. Harumi's touch was hesitant at first, finding her way back to a language she had once been fluent in. But as the piece progressed, muscle memory took over. Her fingers remembered what her mind had tried to forget. The subtle dynamics, the delicate phrasing, the precise pedal work that made the notes shimmer in the air. She played with her eyes closed, lost in the music, unaware of the tears streaming down her face, or the small figure that had appeared in the doorway. Watching in astonishment, when the final notes faded, Harumi sat perfectly still, hands resting in her lap once more. The silence that followed seemed to vibrate with echoes of what had just transpired. "That was incredible," said a soft voice. Harumi's eyes flew open. Miyuki, her supervisor, stood just inside the ballroom, an expression of wonder on her usually stern face. "I'm sorry," Harumi said, standing quickly and bowing. "I shouldn't have—" "No, don't apologize," Miyuki interrupted, coming closer. "I had no idea you could play like that. Where did you learn?" "I studied as a child," Harumi explained, embarrassment making her voice barely audible. "It was a long time ago." Miyuki shook her head, still looking stunned. "That wasn't just studying as a child, that was beautiful." "Why are you working as a maid when you can play like that?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made Harumi uncomfortable. How could she explain the complex web of family obligations, financial necessities, and abandoned dreams that had led her here? "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said simply, moving to close the piano lid. Miyuki placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "The corporate event next week. They requested background music during the cocktail hour. Our usual pianist canceled yesterday. Would you consider playing? Harumi's heart seemed to stop. Me? No, I couldn't possibly. It's been too long. I'm out of practice. What I just heard wasn't out of practice, and Miyuki insisted. Think about it at least. It would mean additional pay, of course. Before Harumi could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of the ballroom doors opening as the evening cleaning crew arrived. Miyuki gave her a meaningful look before walking away, leaving Harumi standing beside the piano, her mind whirling with possibilities she had long ago forced herself to stop considering. That night, for the first time in years, Harumi dreamed of music. In her dream, she was playing on a stage, the spotlight warm on her face, the music flowing from her fingers like water. And in the audience, her parents watched with proud tears in their eyes. No longer burdened by debt or worry, she woke just before dawn, her heart racing, her fingers still moving as if playing the final triumphant chords of her dream concert. For a long moment she lay still, letting the feeling wash over her, not just nostalgia but something stronger. Something that felt dangerously like hope. 3 days before the Fujita Technologies event, the Sakura Hotel buzzed with nervous energy. Staff members polished every surface until it gleamed, replaced all the flower arrangements, and checked every detail twice. Mr. Taniguchi had called an emergency staff meeting for everyone involved with the event, and Harumi found herself sitting in the back row of the employee lounge, trying to be invisible. As you all know, Mr. Taniguchi began, his voice echoing in the crowded room. This event could mean a long-term contract with Fujita. Their CEO, Mr. Yamamoto, is notoriously particular about quality. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Unfortunately, we've hit a small problem. Beside Harumi, Akiko leaned over and whispered, 10,000 yen says someone's getting fired. Mr. Taniguchi cleared his throat. Our entertainment for the cocktail hour has fallen through. The pianist has come down with the flu, and his replacement just canceled as well. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Harumi stared at her hands, suddenly aware of how hard her heart was beating. We need a solution, Mr. Taniguchi continued. Does anyone have any suggestions? Perhaps someone knows a musician who could fill in at short notice. Several staff members offered ideas. A friend of a friend who played in a band. A cousin who studied music in college. Harumi kept her eyes down, fighting the urge to speak up. What was she thinking? She hadn't performed in public for years. She wasn't a professional. Then she heard Miyuki's voice. Actually, we might have a solution right here in this room. Harumi's head snapped up. No, please no. Tanaka-san is an excellent pianist, Miyuki said, turning to look directly at Harumi. I heard her play the other day and she's remarkable. All eyes turned to Harumi, who felt her face grow hot. Mr. Taniguchi looked skeptical. Is this true, Tanaka-san? Harumi struggled to find words. I used to play, yes. But it's been a long time. She's being modest, Miyuki insisted. She played Debussy beautifully. Concert-level playing. Mr. Taniguchi's eyebrows rose. Really? Perhaps you could give us a demonstration, Tanaka-san. Panic surged through Harumi's body. Play here? Now in front of everyone? She opened her mouth to refuse, but what came out instead was, I suppose I could try. The staff room erupted in excited chatter as people moved chairs to make a path to the small upright piano in the corner, usually used for holiday parties. Harumi felt like she was moving through a dream as she stood and made her way to the instrument. The piano was nothing like the grand in the ballroom. It was worn, probably out of tune, with several chipped keys. As she sat on the bench, a hush fell over the room. Harumi stared at the keyboard, her mind suddenly blank. What should she play? Something simple, she decided. Something that wouldn't reveal too much if she failed. She began with Mozart's Sonata in C major, the piece she had played for her very first recital at age 8. The familiar notes came back to her fingers easily, like greeting an old friend. Too easily, perhaps. She found herself playing on autopilot, her mind racing with anxiety. This was a mistake. She should have refused. Halfway through, she stopped abruptly. The room remained silent, everyone waiting. I'm sorry, she said softly. Let me try something else, and then, without planning it, her fingers found the opening notes of Chopin's Nocturne Op. No. 9, No. 2. This was the piece she had been working on when she had to quit her lessons, the piece she had never performed for anyone. As she played, something shifted inside her. The fear began to dissolve, replaced by a feeling she had almost forgotten, the pure joy of making music. The old piano seemed to transform under her touch. Despite its flaws, it sang. Harumi closed her eyes, letting the music take her back to who she used to be, who she might have become. The lyrical melody filled the room, her fingers dancing across the keys with a confidence that surprised even her. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence. Harumi opened her eyes, uncertain. Had she made a fool of herself? Then the room erupted in applause. Her colleagues were standing, their faces showing genuine amazement. Mr. Taniguchi was nodding, a rare smile breaking through his usual stern expression. "I think we found our pianist," he said simply. The next 2 days passed in a blur. Mr. Taniguchi arranged for Harumi to have practice time on the ballroom piano between her regular duties. He even found sheet music for popular classics that would be appropriate background music for a corporate event. But when Harumi sat down to play, she found she didn't need the sheets. The music was still there inside her, waiting to be released. Word spread quickly among the hotel staff. Co-workers who had barely noticed her before now stopped to chat, curious about her hidden talent. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" they asked. "How long have you been playing?" Harumi answered politely but briefly, uncomfortable with the attention. The night before the event, Harumi couldn't sleep. She lay in her small dormitory bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What if she made a mistake tomorrow? What if her skills weren't good enough? What if she embarrassed the hotel and herself? She thought about calling her parents, but decided against it. They didn't know about this opportunity, and she didn't want to get their hopes up. They had always been supportive of her music, had sacrificed so much. Telling them that she was playing again might make them think she was pursuing her old dreams, and that wasn't what this was. It was just a one-time thing, a favor to her employer, nothing more. But as dawn broke, Harumi wasn't so sure anymore. The excitement she felt at the prospect of playing again wasn't just about helping the hotel. There was something else there, something she had buried deep years ago. A hunger for music that had never really gone away. The day of the event arrived, and the Sakura Hotel transformed. Fresh flowers adorned every surface. Soft lighting created a warm glow throughout the public areas, and the staff wore their finest uniforms. Harumi had been given the afternoon off to prepare, a luxury she had never experienced in her 3 years at the hotel. In her room, she laid out the outfit Miyuki had arranged for her. Not her usual maid's uniform, but a simple black dress borrowed from the hotel's collection of formal wear for staff who interacted with guests at special events. It was nothing fancy, but it was elegant in its simplicity. Harumi touched the fabric gently, feeling like an imposter. She wasn't front-of-house staff. She cleaned rooms and changed sheets and scrubbed bathrooms, but today, just for a few hours, she would be something else. At 5 o'clock, Harumi made her way to the ballroom. The event wouldn't start for another hour, but she wanted time to familiarize herself with the space, to feel the energy of the room before it filled with people. The grand piano waited for her in the corner, its lid propped open, its surface gleaming under the chandelier lights. As she crossed the empty room, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor, Harumi felt a strange calm settle over her. This wasn't a concert hall. There would be no expectant audience, no critics with their notepads. She was simply providing background music for business people who would probably hardly notice her. The thought was both comforting and a little sad. She sat at the piano and played a few experimental notes, feeling the action of the keys, the responsiveness of the instrument. It was perfectly tuned, its tone rich and resonant. A piano like this deserved beautiful music. "There you are," said a voice behind her. Harumi turned to see Miyuki approaching, clipboard in hand. "Everything is ready. The guests will start arriving at 6. Are you comfortable with the program we discussed?" Harumi nodded. "Yes, classical pieces for the first hour, then some more contemporary songs during dinner." "Perfect." Miyuki hesitated, then added, "You know, when I first heard you play, I couldn't believe it. Someone with your talent. It seemed such a waste." Harumi looked down at the keys. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said, repeating what she had told Miyuki days earlier. "No," Miyuki agreed. "But sometimes it gives us second chances." She squeezed Harumi's shoulder gently. "Good luck tonight." As Miyuki walked away, Harumi let her fingers rest lightly on the keys, not pressing down, just feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. Second chances. Was that what this was? She began to play softly, warming up with scales and arpeggios, feeling the music flow through her like a current. Each note seemed to wash away a layer of doubt, of resignation, of the quiet despair that had become her companion over the years. By the time the first guests began to arrive, Harumi was ready. As instructed, she played softly, creating a gentle backdrop to the conversations that filled the room. Classical pieces that wouldn't draw too much attention, Mozart, Bach, Chopin. Her body remembered the discipline of performance. Back straight, expression composed, hands moving with precision and grace. From her position at the piano, she could see the entire ballroom. Men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses mingled, glasses of champagne in hand. Hotel staff circulated with trays of appetizers. Mr. Taniguchi stood near the entrance, greeting important guests with deep bows. No one seemed to be paying any attention to the piano music, which was exactly as it should be. Harumi was just part of the ambiance, like the flowers and the lighting. And yet, as her fingers moved across the keys, she felt more alive than she had in years. An hour into the event, as Harumi transitioned to a Schubert impromptu, she noticed a small group of people had gathered near the piano. They weren't watching her directly, that would have been impolite, but they had positioned themselves to listen more closely. One older gentleman in particular seemed to be paying attention, his eyes closed as he sipped his drink. Harumi felt a flutter of nervousness but kept playing, losing herself in the music. This was why she had loved it so much, this feeling of connection, of creating something beautiful out of nothing but air and emotion. As the piece ended, she heard something unexpected, a smattering of applause from the small group nearby. Harumi blushed, bowing her head slightly in acknowledgement before beginning the next piece. For the first time, she wondered if this night might be more than just a favor to the hotel. If it might, in some small way, be a gift to herself as well. The evening progressed smoothly, the buzz of conversation and the gentle notes of Harumi's piano creating a perfect atmosphere for the corporate event. Every so often, Mr. Taniguchi would glance her way and give a small nod of approval. Miyuki had stopped by twice to whisper that everyone was impressed with the music. For the first time in years, Harumi felt a sense of pride in what she was doing. During a brief pause between pieces, a waiter brought her a glass of water. "The kitchen staff asked me to tell you they can hear the music from downstairs," he said with a grin. "They think you're amazing." Harumi thanked him, touched by the gesture. She sipped the water slowly, using the moment to rest her fingers and observe the room. The event was in full swing now, with nearly 100 guests filling the ballroom. Hotel staff moved efficiently between groups, refilling glasses and offering food. Everything was running perfectly, just as Mr. Taniguchi had demanded. As she set down her glass, Harumi noticed a commotion near the entrance. The hotel manager was bowing deeply to someone who had just arrived. Even from a distance, Harumi could tell this was an important guest by the way other people were reacting, turning to look and then quickly pretending they weren't staring. "That's him," whispered a server who was passing by the piano. "That's Kenji Yamamoto, the CEO of Fujita Technologies." Harumi watched as a tall man in his 50s made his way into the room. He moved with the easy confidence of someone used to command, nodding politely to those who greeted him but not stopping to chat. There was something in his bearing that spoke of both authority and a certain weariness, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. Mr. Taniguchi was at his side now, gesturing around the room, clearly proud of the event his staff had created. Mr. Yamamoto nodded but seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the crowd as if looking for something or someone specific. Harumi turned back to the piano. It wasn't her place to stare at important guests. She had a job to do. She began to play again, choosing Debussy's Reverie, a piece that flowed like water, creating a dreamlike quality that seemed to match the soft lighting and elegant surroundings. As she played, she became aware of movement nearby. People were stepping aside, making way for someone approaching the piano. From the corner of her eye, she could see Mr. Yamamoto coming closer, Mr. Taniguchi still at his side, looking nervous. Harumi kept her focus on the keys, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her chest. She was just background music. There was no reason for the CEO to pay any attention to her. She finished Reverie and, without pausing, moved into another piece, Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9 No. 2, the same one she had played during her impromptu audition. Her fingers found the familiar patterns easily, the gentle melody rising and falling like a human voice. What she didn't know was that Mr. Yamamoto had stopped a few feet away, no longer listening to whatever Mr. Taniguchi was saying. His eyes were fixed on her hands as they moved across the keyboard, his expression changing from polite interest to something deeper, more personal. Harumi was lost in the music now, the room around her fading away as she poured her heart into the piece. This nocturne had always moved her, its bittersweet quality speaking to something in her soul. As she played the final section, adding her own subtle interpretations to the dynamics, she felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. How long had it been since she had allowed herself to feel so much while playing? The piece ended, the final notes hanging in the air like a question. Harumi took a breath and looked up, ready to move to the next selection. What she saw made her freeze. Mr. Yamamoto was standing directly beside the piano now, and there were tears streaming down his face. Not just a misty eye or a single tear, actual streams running down his cheeks which he made no move to wipe away. His expression was one of raw emotion, a mixture of grief and wonder that made him look suddenly vulnerable. Nothing like the powerful CEO who had entered the room minutes earlier. The people nearby had noticed too. Some were staring openly, others pretending not to see, embarrassed by this unexpected display of emotion from such an important figure. Mr. Taniguchi looked horrified, clearly thinking that something had gone terribly wrong. He stepped forward perhaps to apologize, but Mr. Yamamoto held up a hand, stopping him. "That piece," Mr. Yamamoto said, his voice hoarse but steady, addressing Harumi directly. "Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Where did you learn to play it like that?" Harumi's hands trembled slightly in her lap. I studied piano for many years, sir." "With whom? Where?" "With Mr. Watanabe in Sapporo until I was 18. Mr. Yamamoto nodded slowly. "He taught you well." "Your interpretation—" He paused, seeming to struggle for words. "It was exactly how my late wife played it." A hush had fallen over this part of the room, people straining to hear the unexpected conversation between the CEO and the pianist. "Your wife, sir?" Harumi asked softly. "Hana was a concert pianist before we married," he explained, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "This nocturne was her signature piece. She played it at our wedding 10 years before she passed away." He gestured to the piano. "When I heard you just now, it was as if she was here again, just for a moment." Harumi didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry for your loss," she managed finally. Mr. Yamamoto shook his head. "No, don't apologize. It was—" He took a deep breath. It was a gift to hear it played with such feeling again. He looked at her more closely now. "You're not the regular hotel pianist, are you?" Before Harumi could answer, Mr. Taniguchi stepped forward. "Tanaka-san works in our housekeeping department," he explained, looking uncomfortable. "Our scheduled pianist fell ill, and Tanaka-san kindly agreed to fill in." "We had no idea she was so accomplished." Mr. Yamamoto's eyebrows rose. "Housekeeping?" He looked back at Harumi with new interest. "How does someone with your talent end up cleaning hotel rooms?" The question hung in the air, blunt and almost accusatory. Harumi felt her cheeks burn. Around them, people were openly staring now, the hushed conversations creating a buzz of curiosity. "Life doesn't always go as planned," she said quietly, the phrase that had become her mantra over the years. Something in her tone must have resonated with Mr. Yamamoto, because he nodded slowly. "No," he agreed. "It rarely does." He wiped his face discreetly with a handkerchief, composure returning. "Would you play something else for us? Not as background music, but as a proper performance. I'm sure everyone here would appreciate it." Harumi looked to Mr. Taniguchi, who nodded encouragingly, though she could see the confusion in his eyes. This wasn't what they had planned for the evening. But when the CEO of Fujita Technologies made a request, the answer was always yes. "Of course," Harumi said, turning back to the keyboard. "What would you like to hear?" "Whatever moves you," Mr. Yamamoto said simply, stepping back to give her space. Harumi took a deep breath, considering her options. This was no longer about providing unobtrusive background music. This was a performance with everyone's attention focused on her. What should she play? Something technically impressive to show her skill? Something emotional to match the unexpected moment? In the end, she chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. It was a piece she had been working on just before she had to quit her lessons. Challenging, passionate with moments of both thunder and whispered intimacy. She had never performed it for anyone, but she had practiced it endlessly in her mind during long shifts at the hotel, her fingers moving invisibly as she made beds and dusted furniture. As she began to play, she was aware of people gathering around the piano, conversations dying away as attention shifted to the music. Mr. Yamamoto had taken a seat nearby, his eyes closed, listening intently. The piece began dramatically, with powerful chords that seemed to demand attention. Harumi's fingers flew across the keys, finding strength she didn't know she still possessed. The technical challenges that had once seemed insurmountable now felt like old friends, difficult but familiar, pushing her to be better. As she moved into the more lyrical middle section, she could feel herself relaxing into the music, letting it speak through her. This wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. This was about reconnecting with the part of herself she had set aside for so long, the part that lived for the magic of creating something beautiful out of nothing but sound and silence. The final section returned to the drama of the opening, building to a powerful conclusion that left Harumi breathless. When the last chord faded, there was a moment of complete silence in the room, as if everyone was collectively holding their breath. Then came the applause. Not polite, obligatory clapping, but enthusiastic, genuine appreciation. People were standing, some calling bravo. Harumi sat stunned, her hands still resting on the keys. Mr. Yamamoto was on his feet too, applauding with the rest. But unlike the others, his expression was thoughtful, almost calculating, as if he was seeing possibilities that no one else had considered. Mr. Taniguchi appeared at Harumi's side, beaming with pride as if he had discovered her talent himself. "Tanaka-san, that was extraordinary," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "We had no idea we had such an artist among us." Harumi bowed her head, overwhelmed by the attention. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to play quiet background music that no one really noticed, then go back to her regular duties tomorrow. Instead, she had become the center of attention, her private passion suddenly on public display. As the applause died down and people began to return to their conversations, Mr. Yamamoto approached the piano again. This time, his composure was fully restored, though his eyes still held that thoughtful look. "Tanaka-san," he said quietly, "would you be willing to meet with me tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." Harumi looked up in surprise. "Me, sir?" He nodded. "Yes, let's say 10 o'clock in the hotel's private dining room. I'll speak with your manager to arrange for your time." He gave her a small smile. "I have a proposition that might interest you." Before she could respond, he was called away by another guest, leaving Harumi sitting at the piano, her mind whirling with questions. What could the CEO of one of Japan's largest technology companies possibly want to discuss with a hotel maid? As she turned back to the keyboard to continue her performance for the evening, she noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear or anxiety this time, but from a feeling she had almost forgotten, excitement about what tomorrow might bring. Harumi barely slept that night. After the event ended, her colleagues had surrounded her, full of questions and congratulations. Even the kitchen staff had come up to meet the piano genius, as they called her. Mr. Taniguchi had personally thanked her, saying the event had been a tremendous success, largely due to her performance. "Mr. Yamamoto rarely stays so long at these functions," he had told her. "He was clearly moved by your playing." Now, as morning light filtered through her dormitory window, Harumi sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the outfit she had laid out. Her regular maid's uniform. Should she wear this to meet with Mr. Yamamoto? It seemed wrong somehow after last night, but it was who she was, wasn't it? A hotel maid who happened to play the piano, not a pianist who happened to clean rooms. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Miyuki holding a garment bag. "Good morning," Miyuki said brightly. "I brought you something to wear for your meeting." Inside the bag was a simple but elegant navy blue dress, professional but not too formal. "This isn't necessary," Harumi protested. "It is," Miyuki insisted. "Mr. Yamamoto requested the meeting in the private dining room, not some back office. And after your performance last night, you deserve to look the part." She hung the bag on the closet door. "Besides, Mr. Taniguchi approved it. He says you're representing the hotel today?" "Representing the hotel? What did that mean?" Harumi's confusion must have shown on her face because Miyuki smiled knowingly. "Something big is happening," she said. Mr. Taniguchi has been on the phone all morning with Fujita's corporate office, and he keeps mentioning your name. After Miyuki left, Harumi dressed slowly, her mind racing. What could Mr. Yamamoto possibly want to discuss with her? Perhaps he was organizing another event and wanted her to play again? That seemed the most likely explanation, yet it didn't quite account for the excitement she sensed from the hotel management. At precisely 10 o'clock, Harumi arrived at the hotel's private dining room, a space reserved for VIP guests and special occasions. A staff member showed her in, then quietly disappeared, closing the door behind him. The room was smaller than she expected, dominated by a polished wooden table set with fine china and fresh flowers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the hotel's Japanese garden, where morning sunlight played on a small stream and stone lanterns. Mr. Yamamoto stood by the window, gazing out at the garden. He turned as she entered, his expression warm but unreadable. "Tanaka-san," he said, bowing slightly. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Harumi bowed deeply before taking a seat, her hands folded in her lap to hide their slight trembling. Mr. Yamamoto sat across from her. Up close, he looked older than he had last night. The lines around his eyes more pronounced, the silver in his hair more noticeable. Yet there was a vitality about him, an intensity in his gaze that made her understand how he had risen to his position. "Would you like some tea?" he asked, gesturing to the porcelain pot on the table. "Yes, thank you," Harumi said, grateful for the familiar ritual. As he poured for both of them, the silence stretched between them. Finally, Mr. Yamamoto set down the teapot and looked directly at her. "First, I want to thank you for last night," he said. "Your playing brought back memories I had thought were lost to me." Harumi bowed her head slightly. "I'm glad it brought you comfort." "More than comfort," he said. "It was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "It was a reminder of beauty, something I had forgotten to look for." He sipped his tea, then set the cup down with a decisive click. "Tell me about your training, Tanaka-san. Mr. Taniguchi mentioned you studied for 15 years. "Yes," Harumi replied, surprised by his interest. "From age 3 until 18, my teacher, Mr. Watanabe, believed I could pursue a career as a concert pianist. I was accepted to the Tokyo Conservatory of Music with a partial scholarship. But you didn't go." It wasn't a question, but Harumi answered anyway. "No, my father was injured in an industrial accident." "The medical bills?" "Well, my family needed me to work." Mr. Yamamoto nodded as if confirming something he had already guessed. "And how long have you been at the Sakura Hotel?" 3 years now. Do you still practice?" Harumi shook her head. "Until yesterday, I hadn't touched a piano in years. We had to sell mine to help with the bills." Mr. Yamamoto was silent for a moment, studying her face. "And yet you played Rachmaninoff last night as if you had never stopped practicing. That suggests remarkable talent, Tanaka-san." She looked down at her teacup, uncomfortable with the praise. "I was surprised myself. I think the music stayed with me even when I couldn't play it." "Some things become part of us," he agreed. "They can't be taken away, even when circumstances change." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table to her. "Do you know what the Fujita Foundation is?" Harumi picked up the card, noting the foundation's logo alongside the Fujita Technologies emblem. "I've heard of it. Your company's charitable organization, isn't it?" "Yes. We fund various initiatives primarily in education and the arts." He leaned forward slightly. "One of our programs provides scholarships to promising musicians. It was my wife's project, actually. After she could no longer perform due to illness, she wanted to help others pursue the career that had been cut short for her." Harumi looked up, beginning to understand the direction of the conversation. "That's very admirable. The foundation also sponsors a concert series at Suntory Hall," Mr. Yamamoto continued. "We feature both established artists and new talents." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "I would like to offer you a scholarship, Tanaka-san, to complete your musical education." Harumi's breath caught in her throat. "Me, but I'm 28 years old. Most pianists start their careers much younger. Age is irrelevant compared to talent," Mr. Yamamoto said dismissively. "And you have talent in abundance. What you need is opportunity." "I don't understand," Harumi said, feeling overwhelmed. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because I played your wife's favorite piece?" Something softened in Mr. Yamamoto's expression. "Partly, yes. but also because I recognize what has been lost. Not just to you, but to everyone who might have heard you play. Talent like yours shouldn't be cleaning hotel rooms, Tanaka-san. It should be shared with the world. Harumi stared at him, unable to find words. This couldn't be happening. Things like this didn't happen in real life, especially not to people like her. I don't know what to say, she managed finally. Say you'll consider it, Mr. Yamamoto replied. The scholarship would cover tuition at the institution of your choice, plus a stipend for living expenses. In return, you would perform occasionally at foundation events. He smiled slightly. You could even keep working here part-time if you wish, though in a different capacity. Perhaps as the hotel's resident pianist. Harumi's mind was spinning. It was too much to take in all at once. This sudden chance to reclaim the dream she had abandoned years ago. What about my family? The reason I started working was to help them. The stipend would be generous enough for you to continue supporting them, Mr. Yamamoto assured her. And if your father needs specialized medical care, the foundation can help with that too. It seemed too perfect, too much like a fairy tale. Harumi's natural caution made her hesitate. Why are you really doing this, Mr. Yamamoto? There must be many talented young musicians more deserving of such generosity. He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his teacup. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more personal. When my wife became ill, she had to give up performing. It broke her heart, but she accepted it as necessary. What she couldn't accept was losing her connection to music entirely. So she founded these programs to keep that connection alive through others. He looked up at Harumi, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. When I heard you play her favorite nocturne last night, it was like hearing her voice again after all these years. I felt her presence in that room, and I knew without any doubt that she would want me to help you. The simple honesty in his voice moved Harumi deeply. This wasn't about charity or business connections. This was about something much more personal. A man honoring his wife's memory by passing forward the gift she had valued most. I would be honored to accept your offer, Harumi said softly. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. Mr. Yamamoto nodded, looking satisfied. Excellent. I'll have my assistant draw up the paperwork. He glanced at his watch. Unfortunately, I have another meeting shortly. But there's one more thing. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. This is an invitation to perform at our annual gala next month. It's a significant event attended by many influential people in the arts. It would be your debut in a sense. Harumi took the envelope with slightly shaking hands. So soon? I would need to practice. The hotel has agreed to adjust your schedule starting immediately. And there's a practice room at the Fujita Foundation building you can use. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. My assistant will contact you with the details. As Harumi rose to her feet, still clutching the envelope, Mr. Yamamoto added, 1 month isn't long, I know, but sometimes life changes in an instant, doesn't it? Yesterday you were a hotel maid. Today you're on your way to becoming the pianist you were always meant to be. After Mr. Yamamoto left, Harumi remained in the private dining room, trying to process everything that had just happened. Through the window, she could see hotel guests strolling in the garden, unaware that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Mr. Taniguchi, looking both pleased and slightly uncomfortable. I've just spoken with Mr. Yamamoto, he said. He told me about the scholarship and your new arrangement. I'm sorry if this causes problems for the hotel, Harumi said automatically. Mr. Taniguchi shook his head. On the contrary, having a Fujita Foundation scholar working here, even part-time, is excellent publicity for us. And besides, he hesitated, then added more softly, it's a wonderful opportunity for you, Tanaka-san. You deserve it. As Harumi left the dining room, she noticed staff members watching her curiously. News traveled fast in the hotel. By tomorrow, everyone would know about her scholarship, her upcoming performance, her sudden change in status. She should call her parents, tell them everything. Would they be happy, worried? Would they think she was being foolish, giving up job security for an uncertain future in music? As she walked through the lobby, her eyes were drawn to the grand piano still sitting in the corner of the ballroom where she had played last night. On impulse, she changed direction, pushing open the ballroom doors. The room was empty now. The evidence of last night's event cleared away. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The piano waited silent but somehow expectant. Harumi crossed the room slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. She sat on the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. Yesterday, playing had felt like revisiting a cherished memory. Today, it felt like stepping into a future she had thought forever closed to her. She began to play, not Chopin or Rachmaninoff this time, but a simple melody she had composed as a teenager, a piece that had never been written down but had lived in her memory all these years. As the notes filled the empty ballroom, Harumi felt tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. Life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes it goes better. The next 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harumi's life transformed so completely that sometimes she woke up wondering if it had all been a dream. Her days, once filled with cleaning rooms and changing linens, now revolved around practice schedules and music theory refresher courses arranged by the Fujita Foundation. Mr. Taniguchi had kept his word, adjusting her hotel work to just 3 mornings a week. Her new role was officially cultural ambassador, a position created specifically for her. In practice, this meant playing the piano in the hotel lobby during afternoon tea and greeting special guests. The rest of her time was devoted to preparing for the Foundation's gala. "How are the lessons going?" Akiko asked one morning as they shared coffee in the staff room. Though Harumi's status at the hotel had changed, she made a point of maintaining her friendships with her former colleagues. "Challenging," Harumi admitted. "Professor Nakamura is brilliant but demanding. He says I've retained my technique surprisingly well, but my repertoire needs expanding." "Are you nervous about the gala?" Akiko's eyes were wide with excitement. "I still can't believe you're performing at Suntory Hall." Harumi nodded, feeling the now familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Terrified might be a better word, but also happy. She smiled, a little embarrassed by the admission. "I never thought I'd have this chance again." "We're all coming to watch you," Akiko said, squeezing her arm. Mr. Taniguchi rented a bus. Half the hotel staff signed up. The thought of her colleagues in the audience should have made Harumi more nervous, but somehow it comforted her. No matter what happened at the gala, she wouldn't be alone. After her shift ended, Harumi headed to the Fujita Foundation building for her daily practice session. The foundation occupied 3 floors of a modern glass tower in downtown Tokyo. The practice rooms were state-of-the-art, each containing a concert-grade piano and recording equipment. As she settled at the keyboard in her usual room, Harumi's phone buzzed with a message. It was from her mother. "Dad got the appointment with the specialist. Thank you for arranging it. We're so proud of you." Harumi smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. True to his word, Mr. Yamamoto had arranged for her father to see one of Tokyo's top orthopedic surgeons. After years of pain and limited mobility from his accident, there was finally hope for improvement. She began her warm-up exercises, scales and arpeggios flowing from her fingers with increasing confidence. Professor Nakamura had selected an ambitious program for the gala, Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9 No. 2, now her piece as everyone called it, followed by Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, and concluding with Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, a technically demanding showpiece that would demonstrate her full capabilities. After 2 hours of focused practice, Harumi was interrupted by a knock at the door. She looked up to see Mr. Yamamoto's assistant, Yui, a poised young woman who managed his foundation work. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Yui said, bowing slightly. "Mr. Yamamoto would like to see you in his office if you have a moment." Harumi followed Yui to the top floor, where Mr. Yamamoto's office overlooked the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Tokyo, the city stretching to the horizon under a clear autumn sky. Mr. Yamamoto was standing by the window when she entered, gazing out at the view. He turned and smiled, gesturing for her to sit in one of the comfortable chairs facing his desk. "How is the preparation going?" he asked, taking his own seat. "Well, I think," Harumi replied. "Professor Nakamura seems satisfied with my progress." "He should be. He tells me you're one of the most dedicated students he's ever taught." Mr. Yamamoto's expression grew more serious. "But that's not why I called you here today. I wanted to discuss what happens after the gala." Harumi felt a twinge of anxiety. Had he changed his mind about the scholarship? As if reading her thoughts, Mr. Yamamoto quickly added, "The Foundation's commitment to your education remains unchanged, of course." But I've been thinking about your longer-term career. My career? Yes. Several influential people in the music world will be attending the gala. Critics, directors of music festivals, recording industry executives. He leaned forward slightly. I've arranged for them to be seated near the stage. If they're impressed, and I believe they will be, doors could open for you very quickly. Harumi's heart raced at the thought. That's very generous of you, but I haven't even performed yet. What if I disappoint them? Mr. Yamamoto shook his head. You won't. I've heard you practicing. You've made remarkable progress in just a few weeks. He paused, considering his next words carefully. My wife used to say that true artists don't choose music. Music chooses them. It finds a way to express itself even in unlikely circumstances. He opened a drawer in his desk and removed a small box. Hana would want you to have this, he said, pushing it across the desk toward Harumi. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny grand piano. She wore it for good luck at her performances, Mr. Yamamoto explained. It would honor her memory for you to wear it at the gala. Harumi stared at the bracelet, overwhelmed by the gesture. I don't know what to say. Say you'll play with the same passion you showed that night at the hotel, he replied simply. That's all anyone can ask. On the night of the gala, Suntory Hall glowed with lights, the cream of Tokyo society arriving in formal attire for the Fujita Foundation's annual event. The program featured several performers, but Harumi's debut was positioned as the evening's highlight, the discovery of an extraordinary new talent. Backstage, Harumi paced nervously in her dressing room, the elegant black gown provided by the foundation rustling with each step. Hana Yamamoto's bracelet gleamed on her wrist, catching the light whenever she moved. A soft knock at the door announced Professor Nakamura, looking unusually cheerful in his formal wear. Are you ready, Tanaka-san? He asked. The hall is full. Standing room only, I hear. Harumi took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Remember what we discussed, he said, his voice taking on the familiar instructional tone. The acoustics in the hall are superb. You don't need to force anything. Let the music breathe, especially in the Chopin. He hesitated, then added more gently, and try to enjoy it. This night is a gift, both to you and to the audience. From the wings, Harumi watched the stage as the MC announced her name, giving a brief, almost fairy tale account of her discovery, the hotel maid whose hidden talent had moved a CEO to tears. The audience applauded politely as she walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, Harumi could make out faces in the front rows. Mr. Yamamoto sat directly in the center, his expression encouraging. Behind him, she spotted Mr. Taniguchi and a large group from the hotel, Miyuki, Akiko, Takeshi, and many others, all dressed in their finest clothes, looking proud and a little awestruck by the opulent surroundings. And there, to her complete surprise, were her parents, her father in a suit that must have been new for the occasion, her mother dabbing at her eyes already, before Harumi had played a single note. She hadn't told them about the gala, not wanting them to make the long journey from Hokkaido in her father's condition. Mr. Yamamoto must have arranged it. Another kindness she couldn't have anticipated. Harumi bowed to the audience, then sat at the magnificent concert grand piano at center stage. For a moment she rested her hands in her lap, collecting herself. Then she looked up, finding Mr. Yamamoto's face in the crowd, giving him a small nod of acknowledgement. She began with Chopin's Nocturne, the piece that had started this journey. Her fingers moved with confidence now, every note imbued with new meaning. This wasn't just Chopin's composition anymore. It was the bridge between her past and her future, between loss and second chances. As the familiar melody filled the hall, Harumi allowed herself to glance at Mr. Yamamoto again. His eyes were closed, a look of peaceful remembrance on his face. She was playing for him, for his wife's memory, but also for herself, for the girl who had once dreamed of moments exactly like this. The piece ended to enthusiastic applause. Harumi moved directly into the Rachmaninoff, the piece she had played that night at the hotel when everything changed. The powerful opening chords rang through the hall, commanding attention. Her confidence grew with every measure, her body responding to the music as if they were old dance partners reunited after a long separation. By the time she reached the final piece, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody, Harumi was no longer aware of the audience or the pressure of the occasion. There was only the music, challenging and exhilarating, pushing her to the limits of her technical ability. Her hands flew across the keyboard in the frenzied final section, building to a triumphant conclusion that had the audience on their feet before the last note had faded. The standing ovation continued as Harumi rose from the bench, bowing deeply to acknowledge the applause. Flowers appeared from somewhere, handed to her by a smiling stagehand. The lights seemed brighter now, the faces in the crowd more distinct. Her parents were both crying openly. The hotel staff were cheering loudly enough to earn disapproving looks from their more restrained neighbors. And Mr. Yamamoto stood perfectly still in the center of it all, applauding steadily, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and something deeper, perhaps the bittersweet joy of hearing his wife's beloved music given new life through another's hands. Harumi took her final bow and walked off stage. She felt a strange sense of completion, not an ending, but a circle closing, bringing her back to the path she had been forced to abandon years ago. Backstage was a blur of congratulations, Professor Nakamura beaming with pride, we handing her business cards from people who wanted to speak with her, her colleagues from the hotel taking turns hugging her. And then her parents were there, her mother embracing her tightly, her father standing straighter than she had seen in years, his face alight with pride. We always knew, her mother whispered. Even when you had to stop, we always knew the music was still in you. Later, at the reception following the performances, Harumi found herself standing beside Mr. Yamamoto as they accepted congratulations from the foundation's supporters. Thank you, she said quietly during a brief lull, not just for the opportunity but for helping me find my way back to music. Mr. Yamamoto smiled, his usual reserve softened by the success of the evening. I should be thanking you. What began as a simple corporate event at a hotel became something much more meaningful. He looked around at the crowded reception, then back at her. Hana would have loved this night. I wish I could have known her, Harumi said sincerely. In a way you do, he replied. Through her music. That's the magic of it, isn't it? Music connects us across time, across circumstances. It finds a way. As the evening drew to a close, Harumi stood by one of the large windows overlooking the Tokyo skyline. 6 weeks ago, she had been making beds and cleaning bathrooms. Her dreams packed away as thoroughly as her old sheet music. Now record companies were competing for her attention, and Professor Nakamura was already planning her first full-length recital. Life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes a joke, a maid playing the piano to amuse her colleagues, becomes the first note of a new composition. Sometimes tears, even a CEO's tears, water the seeds of possibility that have lain dormant for years. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, music finds a way to bring you home to yourself again.